Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Reasons and Resources. So if you're working through these, which I know several people are, welcome back. Also, viewers of the channel that sort of gravitate towards or maybe subscribe because of the programming language content on the channel probably will recognise Factor from a video I did before, and I'll talk a little bit about that video at the end because it goes into a little bit more of the uses, just playing around with Factor, because as you know, this series is really reasons and resources. So what I don't do in these episodes is I don't really dig deep into the language itself. I just give you the resources and some reasons why I wanted to learn the language and why you might want to learn the language, and then really it's up to you to then dig in and understand yourself. So give you the resources and then knock yourself out. But we'll talk a little bit about that video, and I'll include a link to it because it's really useful, and I got some really nice feedback for that particular video as well, so I know people enjoyed that. Anyway, back to this video. So what are some reasons why you might want to learn Factor as a programming language? Now, before we do that, I'll back up as I always do and just mix into that. Like, why did I want to learn Factor? Well, there were several reasons. One was that it came up when I was doing my programming polyglot project, which we'll talk a little bit about at the end of this video, where I am on that. And but also in doing that, I noticed that it was a stack-based language or stack-oriented language, also referred to as you sometimes hear the term concatenative used as well when talking about stack-based languages. And that was important to me because over quite a number of years, I'd been sort of having an off and on relationship with Forth, which was the first stack-based language I became aware of, and I became aware of that way back, I think in the end of the 80s, when I was sort of my first foray into comparative programming languages was at that point. Really, it was at the end of the 80s, where I'd been using Basic for a long time, and then through a series of happy accidents, I suppose, ended up getting exposed to things like Pascal and then a little bit of C, and that sort of whetted my appetite into different paradigms. So when I was looking for something a little bit more obtuse, because I know often when people are talking about learning esoteric languages, I've seen several books that use stack-based languages as a sort of stepping stone to sort of just take you out of your comfort zone. And at the time I learned, or dabbled, I suppose is a better word, dabbled with Forth, I also dabbled with Snowball 4 specifically. So it was nice to sort of revisit that initial, I suppose, excitement of thinking, oh yeah, I remember back to when I was sort of in that comparative languaging phase, which I think, after you've been using one language for quite a while, that happens to most people, I think, where they dabble in another one, and then by they get to about the third one that they sort of know a little bit about, it's like, okay, you start to recognize paradigms. And then for me, and that opened up a whole load of other possibilities and other rabbit holes to go down. So there is that sort of exploration of unusual paradigms, I suppose, was my reason for stepping into stack-based languages. And then recently, when a series of events, I suppose, I bought a book on esoteric languages where it brought up Forth again, and then doing the programming polyglot sort of ongoing project, I became aware of Factor. And then that led into a video I'll talk about at the end. So, that reason, that unique paradigm, programming paradigm, is a reason why other people might want to explore the language. This sort of exploration of a stack-based concatenative programming language, a paradigm that's significantly different from other, like imperative, object-oriented languages. You might, in using it, notice certain similarities with other paradigms, or the fact that using it sort of makes you think in certain ways, which could be, what's the word I'm looking for, paradigm adjacent. So I've noticed that with several languages where, although it might not specifically be in that paradigm, you find that exploring the other paradigm makes you want to explore that other paradigm. So there's some flip-flopping going on there. And the whole stack-based nature of this, it sort of makes you, structurally, in terms of how your code is laid out, think quite differently. I found, for whatever reason, and it is actually in here, that certainly learning stack-based languages actually made me want to really dive into pure functional languages. Now, another reason, and what I was really impressed with, is the REPL, the interactive development environment. The read, evaluate, print loop environment that you can get for Factor, and there's sort of immediate feedback. And I really lent into that quite heavily when I did that a gentle introduction video, which we'll get onto at the end. There's also metaprogramming capabilities if you're interested in manipulating stuff at runtime. That's quite fun to play around with, those sort of concepts. There's also performance issues which you can lean into, and the way in which the languages sort of compile, how they compile into whatever code they're going to be running in under the bonnet. And when you're working in a language, it's useful to understand how the structure of that language works well with what it's ultimately going to end up as running in on the machine. So, and how that's done, whether directly through a conversion to machine code type stuff, or whether it's going to go through and run on some sort of virtual environment, those sort of things. So it's always interesting to play around with languages which sort of push your understanding a little bit of how performance works, how concurrency works, those sort of things. And then if you wrap all that all together, you get this nice opportunity to expand your mindset in programming and to learn something quite different. And as I think I mentioned, one of the books that I was reading, which was a book on esoteric programming languages, I think it was called Strange Code. That the particularly Forth, I've noticed, is often used as a gateway language into even more obscure stuff. Those are some main reasons for thinking about learning Factor. So let's look at some resources. Always good to start off with the Wikipedia article, so I'll include a link to that. I'll include a link a little bit further down into the description. It's always nice when they have a little bit of the language vocabulary and structure in the article, so you can sort of get a bit of a rough idea of what it might look at, and the usual the ubiquitous hello world example. You get into the world of reverse Polish notation as well, which is interesting thing to explore. And there are other languages where it's interesting in going, it's almost like some of the syntax is turned on its head as well. So how the functional aspect sort of feeds in, that's pretty interesting, and it opens up a whole set of rabbit holes you can go down. And I think you see near here a lot of languages are name checked. That's another thing. Again, I'm using it. As I get more exposed to different languages, I start thinking, well, yeah, that bit reminds me a lot of this and reminds me a lot of that. So it might be worthwhile taking a look at what it's influenced by as well. And there's definitely in the wings, I want to do a gentler introduction to concatenative programming language generally, stack-based stuff. I think it'll be interesting to explore by looking at a language and sort of going back and saying, okay, well, this language is built on this. There's another way of looking at it. And so, yeah, keep an eye open for that. I'm just trying to work out what form I want that video to be in, or that series to be in. But it's definitely going to be somewhere along the lines of looking at the evolution of a paradigm. And yeah, so we'll see how that pans out when I get around to thinking about that. Now, if we take our usual look at the Stack Overflow stats, we're still looking here at 2024, because when I'm recording this video, and there's always a bit of a lag on when I record a video to when it goes out, but when I'm recording this video, the Stack Overflow survey for 2025 isn't out yet, so we're still looking at 2024. And I might, in the series, for consistency, continue to look at 2024 in all subsequent, or maybe I just look at both actually when it comes out. That might be a good idea, thinking about it. And I'm pretty sure that factor is not anywhere to be seen, because it's quite niche. I don't even see fourth on it. In fact, I've not bothered, maybe I should have done, I've not bothered necessarily to check to see if any other concatenative, stack-based languages are on these lists. I think what tends to happen is you find in certain years, if you look at the data from consecutive surveys, you'll often see like one particular language from a certain paradigm that's maybe underrepresented, it just suddenly bounce in one year and then bounce back out again, which is always interesting, and I often ponder over why that might be the case. There's the admired and desired. And then we have the top paying. And yeah, I don't really see it there, I don't think. I'm pretty sure it's not on the list. But for consistency, I just wanted to always bring this list up every episode so you can see, if when it's not on the list at all, and when it is, where it is on the list. So I would say this is the best starting point. Okay, so if you're not going to look at any other resource, go here. All the stuff you need. And this is awesome. The environment is really cool, and if you want to see being used before you download it, I'll include a link to a video where I sort of do it in a gentle introduction and go through all of this. But yeah, great starting point. There's also this website, which is concatenative.org, which I believe is a bit older. But it's a real treasure trove of information about concatenative programming and factor. So if you want to sort of, you can see here, look. Yeah, so if you're interested in the concatenative paradigm, then this is great. So yeah, firstly, if it's just factor you're interested in, go here. If you want to know more generally about concatenative programming languages, go here. You can see if we go down, there is in fact an entry on fourth, and you can drill down through this. This is such a useful resource for, and definitely I'm going to lean into this if I do get around to doing something on concatenative languages. So, and there's a good point here is that although the terms get thrown around interchangeably, there's distinctions to them. It's great. Actually, I didn't mention this necessarily, but factor specifically, or fourth, but factor, just because of the way the environment works, is a great way to understand stack. So if you're having, I think one or two people may have commented in the video about that, but if you're having issues trying to understand the stack, and it's really important for you to understand the stack for whatever reason, then I would recommend going with factor and using the environment, and that will really help you understand it. I'll include a link to a specific page about learning factor, which goes through some steps. I think there's some challenges on Code War actually. Got factor tutorial there, and all roads, possibly lead back to the infamous factor REPL, which I'm a big fan of. Now, other resources I might find useful. There's a Google Tech Talk from 16 years ago by Slava Pestov. Okay, so you might want to check that out. I'm always keen to find older videos by the creators of a language. So that's a good place to start. And then we've got another one, the Silicon Valley Fourth Interest Group, where they do one in 2022 about factor. So you might find that if you check out some fourth resources, you might find videos in there which also contain information about factor. Now, in terms of my own projects I've been working on and whether or not they feature factor or not, the Programming Polyglot project, I'll include a link if you want to check this out. Obviously, I started off with seemingly low-hanging fruit for programming, and as I've got through to the harder stuff, in terms of stuff that I have little or no knowledge at all of, it got harder and harder to obviously critique code, because there is an element of this which the project also sort of explores the use of LLMs as a training method for learning new languages. And in order to do that, I need to be able to properly assess code and assess the sort of suggestions that an LLM, a functional model, might give for training advice or advice about how certain functions work in the language. And the problem I got was certain things I just didn't have enough knowledge at the time, and still don't, I suppose, to be able to do that. So these will get filled in slightly slower than I did the initial, 14 or whatever, up to, what was my initial run, up to Rust. And then I've been sort of cherry picking certain things, had a nice run here, and then got a bit bogged down in Similar and Smalltalk and APL, not surprisingly. Prolog was fine. IO I ended up doing 2/3 of. So both IO and Gleam I have covered, but the last third, which in both cases is about concurrency and memory management and various other things, I don't know enough about how that works in a language to be able to critique the stuff that's being produced by training materials being produced by LLMs to feel confident putting information up there. So there's a gap there for those two. Factor's not been done yet. Pearl got done actually. So some of these, as I go through these follow-on Reason of Resources episodes, you'll see that I have actually got an entry for that. But this will get filled in slightly slower and added to. But it was always intended as a you know, a living document as an ongoing thing that I would work on initially. You know, for the first ones up to Rust, I would do as my first tranche, if you like, as first run through, and then everything else would just get filled in on a slightly irregular basis as I felt I wanted to do it. So yeah, and then this thing. So yeah, definitely check this out. You know, so for the channel now, in 2020, where are we? 2025. Yeah, I mean, this is, you know, high-ish for me. Not as high as it used to be in the good old days about 10 whatever years ago, but the content on here was slightly different, and I was sort of riding a bit of a wave that I dropped the ball on. But yeah, it's proved popular. Got a few comments. People thought, one person thought it was awesome, which is always nice when people say that. And yeah, this is a bit about the stack. So yeah, people saying some very nice things here, which is always appreciated. And no, unfortunately, I don't have a Discord community at the moment. So there we have it. So yeah, if you're interested in using, exploring, getting to grips with Factor, there's some reasons and resources to do so. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future video.